Direct listings. They seem to be popping up everywhere right now. But what are they? And why are more companies choosing to go public this way? And is this the end of the traditional IPO? And maybe most important to you is, how does this affect retail investors? In this video, I'll do my best to answer all those questions for you, so stay tuned. Hey everyone, Kevin here, and I want to welcome you to the Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise channel, where we talk a lot about companies going public. Now, historically, that meant by the company holding a traditional IPO, but recently we've seen there's some other more popular options out there. One of the biggest ones have been the SPACs, or the special acquisition companies. And in 2020, in fact, it was called the year of the SPAC. And what a SPAC is, for those of you that don't know, it's just a quicker and cheaper way for a private company to go public. And they do it by merging with a blank check company. It used to be called shell companies. Sort of had a negative connotation, so they don't use that term too much anymore. But the purpose of the blank check company is really just to be able to target a potential company to bring public and then help them do so. So the SPAC has really become a popular way for a company to go public. They've gotten a lot of attention, particularly with retail investors. And even if 2020 was the year of the SPAC, it's not slowing down at all. I mean, everyone is sponsoring a SPAC nowadays, and there's like double digits coming out every week of them being filed. So they're not going anywhere, but that's just one of the options. But lately, we're starting to see more with direct listings, and which is what we're going to talk about today. Now, a lot of you guys have been asking for a video on them, and particularly with the new rules that came out the end of the year. And I told you that one video was coming, and this is it. But I've been holding off until we got closer to the next direct listing coming out, and that's coming up soon. But last year, there's not a lot of them. There was Palantir and Asana were the big names last year, and then this year we're already confirmed with Roblox and Coinbase, and we've talked about them on the channel already, and we'll be talking a lot more about them. Now, the interesting thing with Roblox was that they were planning to go with a traditional IPO until as late as December. Until they saw what happened with DoorDash and Airbnb in their IPO. We've talked about this on the channel before, but basically what happened was the IPO was priced to the institutional investors at one number, and then the stock traded the next day more than double the price. And so what that leaves a company at is that they don't make the money where the stock is trading, they make it from the IPO. So they start to question, like, if the stock is being traded like this on the public market, why didn't we set the IPO price higher? It's what they call leaving money on the table. And so what Roblox did is they decided to put the brakes on and look at their options. So after looking at their options, they made the decision to go ahead and go public with a direct listing instead of a traditional IPO. And now we're also hearing legitimate rumors of two new companies seriously considering a direct listing. One we've talked about on the channel before, and one we haven't. And I'll tell you more about those ones in a little bit. So with the more interest in direct listings and more coming on the way, could 2021 be the year of the direct listing? And are direct listings any better for retail investors? I know more questions than what I already asked at the beginning of the video, but I will answer them. But before we do, let's talk about what direct listings are. So direct listings, which have also been called direct placements, are formally called a direct public offering, or DPO. Now, there are some new rules, which I alluded to earlier, and I'll talk about them soon, but traditionally, with the direct listing, no new shares are created, and the company basically just offers existing stock directly to the public, so no new capital is raised. Now, a lot of you might say, well, what's the point of going public if you're not trying to raise money? And that's typically what we do with an IPO. Well, one of the big reasons is for the liquidity factor. So what that means is if you are one of the insiders of the company, whether you're one of the founders or an early investor or even an employee that's put in time and has gained stock over the years, it's really hard to sell those shares that you have and capture your gains for your investment. Just really hard to do in the private markets. And by going public, you have the opportunity to put those shares out where more people can buy them. And think about how often you guys have gone and bought something on the private markets. I'm going to guess most of you haven't. And I haven't done that. So it's not easy to do. But once those shares become publicly available, you potentially have more buyers out there. And just that fact makes your shares more valuable. So it's one of the big reasons why a company might choose to go with a direct listing. And then another reason a company might decide to go with a direct listing over a traditional IPO is that it eliminates the needs for investment banks or underwriters. So it's another it's a cheaper option basically to go public than using a traditional IPO. So let's talk a little bit about what makes direct listing different from a traditional IPO. And as you guys know, I'm sure most of you know, an IPO stands for initial public offering. And in initial public offering, new shares of the company are created. And those shares are underwritten by a bank who promotes the company through a roadshow. And during the roadshow, again, it's very promotional. But what it also does is it helps to determine the interest in the company. And then based on that interest and assessing the company through some valuation measures, they determine a share price. And then they work on selling that shares of the company at the IPO, which is, not the public trading day, but this is really for institutional investors to be able to buy into the company, and it buys them at a set price. And again, this is usually the day before public trading. So I know, again, a lot of us think about an IPO as the day it starts to be available to everybody, but it's usually the day before. And this has become a big concern for the companies because, like we talked about with Airbnb and DoorDash, they only get the money that is raised at the IPO itself. And also for retail investors because, you see that an institutional investor can buy at one price and then by the next day the share could be trading twice as much, and so there's not a lot of fairness in that. Now there is some value in the bank setting the price a little bit lower than what they think it could trade for. That way the IPO can come off as a success. But if it trades a lot higher, the company leaves all that money on the table that they could have made had they just put their shares out and got the price of what the market says it would be worth. And then just another thing, IPOs are much more expensive in that there's an average of about 7% of the commission for the underwriting intermediary, which again, you don't need to do with a direct listing. All right, so let's now talk about some of the benefits of a direct listing to a company and its shareholders. So number one, we already said it's a cheaper way to go public than an IPO, again, because you don't have to have the underwriters. It prevents share dilution since no new shares are created. So think about this. If you, so the company has 100 shares, we'll use an easy number, and you own one share of it. With a direct listing, with no new shares being created, once those shares are sold on the open market, you have 1% of the company. However, if with an IPO where there's new shares created, so let's say that to make it easy, say there was 100 new shares created, then your value in the company with your one share goes down to 0.5%. So you can see there's a dilution factor. You don't have that with a direct listing. So that's another benefit for the shareholders. Another benefit is that you have greater liquidity to the existing shareholders. So you're not required to do lockup agreements. Although a company can choose to do them, as we saw with Palantir, it's not required. So in most cases, they're not a lockup. And without the lockup, all shares could potentially be sold on day one for whatever the market commands. Now compare that to traditional IPOs where you may have to have your shares be locked up for 180 days or 6 months. So you're, again, waiting a lot longer to be able to capture your gains. And again, a lot can happen in 6 months. So, it's another factor is, again, having that increased liquidity, right when the company goes public. Now, those are some of the main benefits of a direct listing. However, there are some risks, like there are with everything. One of the big ones is that there's potentially more volatility because you're having, again, all of the shares out there at one time. Again, traditional IPOs limit this with lockups. So, with a traditional IPO, new shares are the only ones that can be traded in most cases, where existing shares can't be. And that could be 80% of all outstanding shares. With a direct listing, potentially all of the shares are out there. Another potential risk with a direct listing is that the company has to underwrite its own shares through that direct listing, meaning that there is no supporting bank to support share prices by buying any additional stock if it's necessary. Also, another factor is you're not having the experience of the underwriters to help navigate through regulations, which as you guys know with the SEC, that's a big deal. Now, what I will say is typically done is that a company will try to reduce its risk by hiring a bank as a financial advisor. And so again, helps them through the regulations, can also help them set that reference price. And that reference price, again, doesn't mean what it means with an IPO price where actually shares are being sold at that price. A reference price is just basically a price that the shares can be advertised at and where they think that the shares may sell at. But again, it could be really any number. It just doesn't mean as much as what you get with an IPO price. Another risk out there is that there's no promotional roadshow. And really, again, those roadshows are helpful in getting those established and more stable long-term institutional investors. So you don't have that, and so that's a risk because then you're potentially having more of your investors being the retail investors that are more likely to buy and sell. And the prices become again more volatile. Now, one of the ways that the companies can still promote their direct listing is, and we've seen this with Palantir and Roblox, is that they can hold an investor day. So it's helpful. It's not the same, but it is something to help, again, promote the direct listing. All right, so those are some of the benefits and some of the risks. But before we talk about if direct listings can really replace the traditional IPO and the benefits to a retail investor, let's talk about the new rule. So there was a new rule change, and it happened in December, where the SEC approved the New York Stock Exchange's proposed rule change, which allows direct floor listings that allow companies to sell shares in a single large transaction directly on the exchange without underwriters. So what this means is that they can now use a direct listing to obtain capital or to raise money. And they can do it without underwriters. And one of the benefits of the rule is that the new shares that are created will get priority over the secondary shares. So that's important because with a company is trying to predict what their shares are going to be worth and what money they can raise, getting their new shares out first is important in that regard. Now, to this point, no company has decided to use the new rule yet to take advantage of the ability to raise capital. Instead, what we've been seeing, particularly with Roblox and Coinbase, is that they went with a round of private fundraising before their direct listing. So they made the money first, and then now they'll put the shares out once they do the direct listing. So that comes back to one of my questions, and that being, will direct listings kill off traditional IPOs? And to answer that, I like to think about if someone is considering selling their house and they want to do it with either an agent or they want to try to do it on their own as a for sale by owner. So if you do it on your own as a for sale by owner, you save a commission, which typically is about 6%. Now, to save that 6% is a lot more work for you. You got to fill out the papers. You got to make sure you're doing everything from a regulatory aspect. You don't have someone promoting the house for you, so you have to do that. You don't have inside access on the MLS, which is where buyer agents typically provide listings to their clients. So all of this tends to be a little overwhelming. And so what happens is the majority of people just say, I'm calling an agent, and with that 6%, they're going to take care of it all. Now, obviously, we know that there are people that sell the house on their own, and they do really well with it. But they usually have a couple things going for them. One, they're in a hot market. Maybe there's been a lot of other houses sold, so they can do good comparison to get an idea of the price, what they can expect to get for their house. It could be that it's just a seller's market, so it's going to be easier for them. So things like that are factors when you might decide if you're going to sell a house on your own or go with an agent. And so now getting back to direct listings or traditional IPOs, I think, again, you have to look for a company that fits the bill for a direct listing. I think there's going to basically be two types. One, there could be the small company that really can't afford the underwriters, although that's probably a bad sign and very risky for a small company that don't have the resources. But that's one that could potentially use a direct listing. The second would probably be your more bigger companies, your well-known companies, the ones that have financial resources. So think of like Spotify, who had a direct listing in 2018, and Slack, who had a direct listing in 2019. So you have two companies that are really well-known. They have a lot of customers that can become aware of their direct listing. They have the financial resources to advertise it. They can still work with banks and whatnot, for advisement. So that could be a kind of company that chooses to go with a direct listing. But aside from those kind of companies, think of like your lesser well-known companies going public where raising capital is really important. And think about like companies early in their development, like early stage biotechs. A traditional IPO probably makes more sense. Just the promotion alone from an established book runner like a Goldman Sachs or a Morgan Stanley could be invaluable to them as far as raising money. And just think about it. I mean, you have a Goldman Sachs out there, speaking on your behalf, trying to get other institutional support. Probably is going to be more fruitful if they do it than you as a lesser well-known company. So I think still going to have a lot of companies going the traditional IPO route, but there are those unique situations where I think certain companies will go public with a direct listing, and again, we're starting to see some more of that. Now, the other big question that I want to answer for you guys is what are the benefits of a direct listing to a potential new investor, particularly us retail investors? So to me, one of the big ones is that we don't have to wait in line behind the institutional investors who can buy it at one price the night before the actual trading begins and then sell it once the trading starts the next day. I mean, nothing is more frustrating to a retail investor than to see that. I mean, again, just think about it. An institutional bank buys the shares at one price. The next day, they're the only ones that can sell it because everybody else that had shares before have lockup agreements. So whatever the demand is, they can sell their shares for a lot more and basically in one day. Wouldn't that be nice for the rest of us to have that opportunity? Another benefit is just that there are more shares of the company out there, at least a higher percentage since there are no lockups or they don't need to do lockups. So basically, all the shares are available to trade on day one, whereas again with a traditional IPO, you might only have 15 to 20% of the company shares that are actually available to be traded. And then really, it should just be a fairer process. I mean, you put your buy order in, and somebody else puts their buy order in, and whether it's an institution or just another retail investor. And again, the best price should get the stock. And so, because of that factors, I just think that there's a lot of benefit to retail investors when it comes to direct listing versus a traditional IPO. So is 2021 the year of the direct listing? Obviously there was a lot of interest in Palantir last year, and there still is a lot of interest in Palantir. And now we have Roblox and Coinbase coming out early this year. And again, all those companies meet that profile of the companies I think would make sense to do a direct listing. And now we're hearing rumors that UiPath and Databricks could also go with a DPO. Now, we've talked about UiPath before on the channel. They were listed as one of those 7 companies I expected to go public early in the year. But Databricks is the one we've talked about. And it's another one of those hot tech companies. Think about some of the things it's involved in. Artificial intelligence, data analytics, and the cloud. I mean, do you think this is going to be a popular stock or not? I mean, it has to be, right? Now, as we get more information on both of those companies, I'll definitely cover them in the channel. But at this point for today's video, I'm going to say that 2021 will be the year of the direct listing. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, please like it, comment on it, and share with your friends and on any of your social media sites. And if you're new to the channel or just an occasional visitor, we'd love to have you join the community. It's totally free. You just got to press that little red subscribe button. And with that, I wish you a good week of trading. Thank you for watching, and until next time, have a great day.